Hey everyone, it's Brandon Lee, host of the podcast Escaping Rock Bottom. It's good to have you here for this episode. I'm really excited for this conversation. Today you're going to meet the primary therapist over at Pinnacle Peak Recovery. Her name is Kim. Not only is she a primary therapist, but she has a killer story to tell us today that includes harm reduction, in which I am a huge proponent of and totally in favor of. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation because it actually goes back to my days when I was a journalist here in the Valley, when I did a little bit of an expose, kind of a mini documentary on harm reduction with a group called Shot in the Dark. So if you go online right now on YouTube, you can actually do Brandon Lee Shot in the Dark. It'll populate on YouTube. Go ahead and give that story a follow and a watch. This conversation that we're about to have with Kim will make a lot more sense. Kim, it's good to have you here.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
Yeah, it's cool. We were just kind of shooting the shit in my office before we came into the podcast studio about harm reduction, which we'll get into because it'll be a fascinating conversation. Mm-hmm. I'm always about educating the public, about meeting people where they're at, and that does include harm reduction. Before we get there, Kim, tell me a little bit about you before you were a primary therapist at Pinnacle Peak. Tell me a little bit about you and your childhood.
Well, I was raised on the East Coast in Massachusetts, and I am an incest survivor. I was raised with my mom, dad, my brothers, and I had family members who were sexually abusing me. When I was 12 years old, around 12 or 13, we moved to Arizona, and when we came here, I disclosed to my mom what had happened, and we never talked about the conversation again. And that following summer, my parents sent me to stay with one of my abusers, and that was a really difficult time for me. I came to Massachusetts, and I was so confused. I didn't know why I was sent to stay with this person. I didn't believe that I was believed, and I was terrified. I was so afraid that he might do something to hurt someone else, and I was angry. More than anything, I was really angry. And so I was there. I was suicidal. I was homicidal. I was ready to kill him. Literally, I had knives tucked in places, and I wanted him to do something to give me an opportunity to kill him.
Oof.
It was so much pressure for, a 13-year-old girl that had just really come into her own, realizing what happened. And I remember one day I got a call. It was just a day or two since I'd been there, and one of my cousins said, "Hey, let's go for a ride." And I said, "All right, get me out of here," right? I went for a ride, and I got really, really high for the very first time. And that was the day I believe drugs saved my life and saved the life of someone else. They changed my life dramatically.
Because you really do believe that you would have gone and killed him.
I do believe I would have killed him.
Yeah. Kim, there's a lot of similarities already. And I go back to my childhood too. Repeatedly just molested and sexually assaulted about the ages of 7 to 10. Youth soccer coach, next door neighbor, piano teacher every Friday. And that changed me forever. Because when that kind of trauma happens to us as children, our brains are still forming, and that trauma has an everlasting impact on us.
It does.
And at 15, you started acting out at what, 13 is when you got high? I got high when I was 15, became a sex worker and a cocaine addict, right? When you had the opportunity in which you say drugs saved your life, you were escaping, right? That numb felt good, right?
It was the best feeling ever because I just didn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. And I didn't need anybody to make it okay for me. It just didn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed at that moment.
And I think at that time, at least for me, I knew when I did that cocaine and these other drugs at 15 that that escape just felt better than my reality. Just felt good.
Absolutely.
And so I'm like, well, if this feels good, well, I'm going to continue chasing that feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And then we chase it and we chase it, and we are already off the rails. Where did that lead you? If you were doing drugs at 13, where did that lead you?
That led me to, at the end of that summer, I came back to Arizona. I had my first law enforcement contact before I was 16 for drug use.
Yeah.
I did graduate high school, but I had such low self-esteem. I thought so low of myself. Like you, I had no sexual boundaries.
Right.
I had what I believed was that my worth was based in my sexuality, that somebody else needed to desire me in order for me to have worth. Because I didn't have one offender, two offenders, three offenders. It seemed to be the construct of the community that I lived in.
It's so interesting you say that, because when I was essentially a sex worker in Orange County in Laguna Beach, California, I would go and sit in the alleyway of this Laguna Beach motel where older gay men hung out. Mm-hmm. And I would be 14, 15 years old. And I would sit on a little embankment in this alleyway, and these guys would drive by, and I would get in their car, and we'd go up into the mountains of Laguna Beach, in the hills of Laguna Beach, and we'd have sex, and then they would drop me off back at that embankment in this dark alleyway at the motel in Laguna. And because I had gay shame as well back then in the mid-90s, I said, you can't have sex with the same person twice, because then people will find out you're gay and you'll be caught. So for a period of 4 years, I had sex with a different man 5 nights a week for 4 years.
Wow.
And when I finally got therapy for it, I told my therapist, and I said, that wasn't sexual trauma. I said, I wanted it. Like, I walked down to that alleyway. Like, I chose to be there. Like, little boy Brandon being molested, that wasn't okay. But when I was 14, 15 years old, like, I purposefully walked to that alleyway and sat there waiting for that. And my therapist goes, okay, next session, bring a picture of yourself at age 14 for me, okay? So I did. She put those pictures in front of me, and she goes, does that little boy look like he can make a decision about having sex with men in their 40s and 50s?
Wow.
And that moment, right, seeing myself as a little boy in those pictures, and I finally admitted no. And she goes, Brandon, the body knows the score. Mm-hmm. Every time you had sex with one of those older men who violated you was traumatizing to you. And at age 37, when I told my parents that I was molested, my mom denied it. At 37 years old, made excuses for them.
Wow.
And so that denying of that trauma re-traumatized me.
Absolutely.
Just
I think
like
that's more traumatizing sometimes, because we trust our parents. They're supposed to protect us.
that is their only job.
If I'm 2 or if I'm 42, that was their job. And then for them to deny, and like
or
my
even
mom,
minimize.
Yeah, like my mom had said, well, what were you wearing?
See.
And I'm like, I don't know. I was 7, whatever you dressed me in.
Right.
And that shouldn't matter. And then it was just, stay away from them. Don't go near them. It was never, your body is precious.
Right.
And valuable. Never, ever did I get that message.
It's so traumatizing. It's traumatizing, that inner child work, which I would love to also talk to you about. When did you eventually get sober?
I found sobriety in 2000. I was 33 years old.
Okay. Yeah. I was 28 when I finally kind of decided to get, clean and sober. And I think it's kind of a beautiful thing that you work at Pinnacle Peak. You're a primary therapist, you're a recovered drug addict, and you're also a sex trauma survivor.
Yeah, I am.
And I think it's a beautiful thing that you're able to, Kim, sit down and look at somebody else and see them and break through to them. Because I'm a huge fan of peer support in recovery. I mean, clearly even insurance companies allow you to bill for peer support because they understand that another peer can sometimes break through to another alcoholic or an addict way faster than a therapist with no experience in recovery.
Absolutely.
You're kind of like the double warrior there. You're not only a trained therapist, but you also have that lived experience. And I think that how do you find that to be helpful?
Gabor Mate talks about the way that we can diffuse trauma is with a sympathetic adult. So if somebody is going through trauma, just to validate what they're going through and hold them, tell them, wow, that must hurt or be painful or sad, whatever it is, then that can prevent the trauma. So I understand this trauma, and I'm able to meet with people and validate what they went through. And most of what I do is validation that this sucks, this hurts.
Yeah.
And how can I love you, help you through this? Most people are using because it's a maladaptive coping skill.
100% it is.
Yep, we just get high because we say, I don't want to feel this thing anymore.
Yep.
But how can I help you to feel this and stay okay?
Yes.
That becomes the challenge.
It really does. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to be able to sit there and say, and validate, I can see that you're in so much pain. But then say, I know what it feels like.
Right. Because with sexual trauma, it's a little bit different because there's that other angle of it where there's a pleasure. And
that's so true. It's a
fear,
mind fuck.
And
it's really a mind
fear
fuck.
And excitement, and they're neighbors, and I don't understand how they work and affect my brain, and it feels like the body's betraying you, and so having people to normalize that for people, like, this is what happens. It's not your body's fault. You didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, but you know what the mind fuck is what I told my therapist is I enjoyed it.
Yeah. While you were terrified.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
But just because the body betrayed you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's like this, two things are like happening at once. It's
right.
horribly traumatic to have a 40 or 50-year-old man molest a 14 or 15-year-old boy. Like, full stop, wrong, right? Wrong.
Right. And what you're describing is that you're only aware of your somatic response. Like, my physical response says, I enjoy it.
I enjoy it.
Internally, though, you were so disconnected from your feelings.
Correct. And that destroyed me for
Yes.
decades.
Me too.
Personal relationships, dating. What are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, people will look at me, and they honestly still sometimes do, even though I'm the most healed version of myself. And they're like, yo, B, how do you not have a husband? Like, how do you not? When's the last year? It's been 12 years since you had a boyfriend. Like, what is wrong? We're
We're
what was
avoidant.
wrong? We're avoidant. It's me. Yeah, 100%.
But we're working on it.
But we're working on it. And
That's
here's the
right.
thing. And that's why I say, like, God, that the work that I've done since my relapse in 2020 has all been inner child work, going back. And I don't have to be avoidant. I don't have to be scared. I don't have to be in flight mode.
Right.
I can trust, I want to get into harm reduction because that's actually, it's a really fascinating thing. So I did this story back, I think it was like in 2017. Yeah, 2017 sounds about right. And I met this guy, George. He was kind of leading Shot in the Dark. He was a point person for Shot in the Dark at the
Right.
time. And Shot in the Dark is here in Arizona, and it's a harm reduction group. And they go out, they set up these locations. Back then, I don't know how they're operating now that it's legal, but back in the day when it was not legal to be doing harm reduction out on the streets of Arizona, we went out to Fiesta Mall parking lot, abandoned mall at the time, and they hand out tourniquets, they hand out clean cooking plates, your syringes, your all the stuff you need, right, to shoot up drugs, except for the drugs, and they give out Narcan, right? So which is a life-saving drug to get somebody who's overdosing. And when I did that, the purpose of me doing that story, Kim, was to get the public to remove the stigma about who a heroin addict was. That a heroin addict is not just some homeless person living on the streets, right? That's the general public's view of a heroin addict. Scum,
Right.
low life, right?
Right.
Not working professionals. out of the 100 people who showed up in 45 minutes, only 2 were homeless. The rest were driving in BMWs, Range Rovers I saw, crane operators, kindergarten teachers, getting their clean cooking supplies. No. 5 years ago, people were so against harm reduction. They're like, this is just making the drug epidemic worse. It's not helping people, da, da, da. The reason why I talk so much about harm reduction is because it's about meeting people where they're at. And the fact of the matter is, addiction and recovery is not black and white. And I think that society has always viewed addiction as black and white. You're either using drugs and abusing them, or you're not doing them at all, right? And what I tell people is like, not everyone is ready to commit to full residential treatment, all right? And sometimes you just got to kind of meet them where they're at to keep them alive. Mm-hmm. Where have you seen, and I actually look at harm reduction, this is going to be kind of a stretch for some people to believe, but I look at the advancements of harm reduction in gay marriage, okay? Statistically. Because if you go back to the 80s, gay marriage, it was like 95% of people were against it. And in the 90s, not that great. Early 2000s, there was a shift. Right? Huge shift.
Right.
And within a matter of years, it like swung. Now it's like 80% of people can give 2 fucks about gay marriage. They're like, yeah, of course. Why is there an issue with gay marriage? And I'm seeing the tides turn similarly with harm reduction. Whereas maybe a decade ago, people was like 100%. People were like, no way. They're 99%. And now I think that the needle's moving where people are starting to be more educated about what harm reduction is. So as an expert in harm reduction, explain what harm reduction is for the general public who may not be so educated about it.
Okay. Harm reduction is an approach that is used with people who are actively using substances that can help decrease their risks. Harm reduction in this sense, it can also be about public transportation. It can involve seatbelts. It can involve Tide Pods. We keep them in a special container now.
Yes, yeah.
There's many, many things that are harm reduction. But the harm reduction that I do is surround substance use. Mm-hmm. And it says that your life matters and that I want to keep you as safe long enough until we can figure out your problem.
Yeah.
And it's not always based on a dysfunctional relationship with substances. Sometimes people may just go out and use just to use. It doesn't mean that they have a problem with the drug. It just means that maybe they need more education on how to stay safe. For example, if you're first going to go out and start drinking and you're going to need some education about, well, here's how you get an Uber. Here's how, the time limits. We've studied it long enough. If you have 2 beers within 2 hours, you should be okay to drive home. So we do these harm reduction approaches. If you stay longer, call an Uber. For me, I meet people and I say, okay, so you're going to inject that heroin into your body. Tell me about how you're going to do that and where you're going to do that. Or you're going to do it in your neck? Well, let's talk about other places that might be safer for you to use.
Right.
It's not that person's going to use in their neck.
Right.
If I don't do an intervention or I don't help them, then that's not a good outcome.
No.
Using someplace else on the body is a better outcome, and we can talk about that.
And even on safe injection sites.
Yes.
Right? When you think about that. Now, listen, the big pushback is not in my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It's always not in my neighborhood.
It's already there.
It's already there.
Yes.
It's happening there. And if you know what? If you don't have a safe injection site, guess where they're going to do it? In the parks.
Yeah.
Right? And then where are they going to dispose of those needles? Okay, they're high. They're going to throw them in the sand. Mm-hmm. And then when your child goes to the park the next day and they are barefoot in there, they can easily step on them, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like we're forcing them out to use in these other public places, right? And I tell people, I'm like, but at safe injection sites, at least there's people there. Mm-hmm. So when somebody, not if, when somebody overdoses, somebody's there to save their life.
Yes.
And just like you can call a number now while you're using, to let them know.
Never use alone.
Never use alone. And you can pick up a call. Nobody's going to report you. And they make sure that you're still conscious, right? Because one day, maybe they'll see the light. Maybe one day they'll see, like, I know there's another way. And this person who was really nice to me, who didn't try to force something on me, I feel safe to go talk to that person now because they're not going to judge me. Because if you intervene with somebody and say, hey, listen, I'm not here to tell you not to use, okay? Okay, listen, you're going to use. But maybe if you use over here, this will be a safer outcome for you, okay? They're going to know that you're a safe person to talk to. You're not going to judge them because you would have already judged them.
Absolutely.
And they feel safe enough. And I also tell people harm reduction's this. It's like, okay, you don't want to go to residential treatment? Okay, you don't have to, right? The excuse is, I have a job. I can't leave my job. I won't have, okay, there's IOP. You can go to work all day. And then maybe we get you to a program at night. We get you started that way. And, maybe over time you realize, shoot, maybe I do need residential over time. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing with behavioral health that we have to use this language is meeting people where they're at.
Absolutely.
Because not everyone is where you want them to be or hope that they're going to be. They're just at where they're at. And what are the resources available to them to keep them alive? And hopefully with needle exchange programs like that, they're not going to get Hep C. Because what people have to understand is a heroin user or a needle user is going to use, okay? Preventing them access to clean drug supplies is not going to get them to stop using. They're just going to use a dirty needle.
Absolutely.
They're going to get Hep C. The chances of them getting HIV increases tenfold, right?
Absolutely. And on top of that, our drug supply is so tainted with fentanyl.
Oh, God.
That to have a tainted drug supply and dirty works, you have some disastrous outcomes for us as a community. This is about, even our communities. Someday this person is going to want to make a change. And I want them to have 2 arms when they do. I want them to still be able to walk. I don't want them to be dead or to have had a stroke. And if I can prevent those conditions from happening, and I know how, it's my obligation to pass on that information.
Let's talk about fentanyl testing strips. Harm reduction.
Oh my gosh. You know what? Fentanyl testing strips, you can buy them on Amazon.
Yes.
They're $25. For 25 of them, it's $1. I say to parents, if your kids are using, buy them fentanyl test strips.
Yes.
If you have a student at ASU
yes.
and finals are coming up, buy them fentanyl test strips.
Yep.
Because the
cocaine,
the Adderall,
whatever they think they're
Adderall,
using.
All of that may be tainted with fentanyl.
Fentanyl is, first off, people need to know this. Fentanyl is in everything. It's even in marijuana these days that you buy on the streets. It's in everything now, the street drugs. Here's what I tell people, oh God, there's people against fentanyl testing strips. I'm like, why? Like, how can you be against fentanyl testing strips? Because in their fucking messed up mind of their delusion, they're like, this is just encouraging drug use. Oh my God. Giving somebody a fentanyl test strip is not encouraging them to use drugs. Like, how do
No, it doesn't. It empowers them to change how they're using their drugs.
Exactly. And here's what I tell people. Okay, fine. You're going to go to Coachella. You're going to go to EDM festivals. Okay. And if you're a parent in Scottsdale and Paradise Valley listening to this and thinking that your child is safe from fentanyl, think again. Because ask your child, do they go to Coachella? Mm-hmm. Ask your child, do you go to EDM festivals? Mm-hmm. And if your child says yes, you better give them a fentanyl testing strip. Because when they go to those EDM festivals, guess what they're going to do? They're going to buy little cute pills from somebody they don't know. And they're going to take that whole pill. Absolutely. And if one of those pills has too much fentanyl in it, your child's never coming home from that EDM festival. Here's what I'm telling. I would never run for fucking politics.
I can't.
But if I did, I would make it mandatory that at every music festival, each person is given on admittance with their damn ticket 2 fentanyl testing strips. That way, when they're in the festival and they do buy drugs, they can at least go, let me just test this really quick to see if there's fentanyl in it. Mm-hmm. It'll save their life. And I tell parents who are against it, would you want your child to come home or not? Because if you don't think your child's doing ecstasy at these EDM festivals, you're fooling yourself. I don't know the statistics, but I would say 95% of people who go to EDM or Coachella are using some sort of a drug.
Absolutely.
They just are.
Absolutely. And what I found when we were handing out test strips through Shot in the Dark is that when people knew what was in it, they could change how they used it. So they were able to use smaller amounts.
Yes.
They were able to not use alone. They were able to be more cautious going into it, which made for better outcomes.
Yes, and here's the other thing too. We're seeing a lot of stories like this, anecdotal stories of somebody taking a pill and then they cut it in half. And one person who takes half is fine and the other person is dead. Why? Because all the fentanyl was on that half of the pill.
Mm-hmm.
These are being made by people who don't know what the hell they're doing, or they do know what they're doing, and but they're also slamming these things together.
Yeah.
It's not equally distributed in the pill that they're taking. So even for those who are listening, if you think you're going to go smoke a pill, or you're going to go do something, and you're taking half thinking that that's going to be safe, well, that half could have the entire pill's amount of fentanyl on that side.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think when all of us have a duty when we speak out and we have the platform to speak about addiction and treatment and modalities that help heal that are all out there, we have to be talking about harm reduction along the way. Mm-hmm. We just do.
Yeah, it's the precursor even for people that don't have substance use disorders.
That's what I mean. Because everybody who goes to Coachella, everybody who goes to these EDM festivals, they're not all drug addicts. But
Right.
Guess what? They are going to experiment.
Absolutely. Or their friends are.
Yeah.
And if I'm there with you and you're my best friend and you fall out, I want to help you.
Right.
That's trauma to watch your best friend die.
And it is absolutely traumatic. And here's what I love too, is that when we did that story with Shot in the Dark, harm reduction was so illegal in Arizona. But guess what you can do now? You can now go to CVS today and you can ask for Narcan and you're not going to be charged $1. Like you can,
Only if you're on access.
oh, if you're on access. Yeah. But you can go and you can get.
You know how much they're charging for a kit though? Like over $100.
Are they really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I hate
That's
pharma.
crazy.
Yeah. Big pharma.
That's crazy.
And there's a Narcan shortage right now.
Why?
Let's talk to Big Pharma. I don't know why. There's a major shortage. Like there's no Narcan coming out of
Why?
storm
Because they've all been doing
prevention
COVID shit lately, or what? Making the COVID vaccine, so they stopped production on this other stuff.
They've
I
been
don't know.
doing that for a while, so I don't know. It's a great question, but it becomes even more important because there's limited access to Narcan that people never ever use alone. And that can be a really hard thing to do, to not use alone, especially if someone's on a relapse or just maybe they've recently quit, or maybe they're keeping it hidden from the people that they love. And so for those people, I would really suggest that if they get something from a new source, that they do a little tester, maybe go someplace where there's other people around right after you use. So
Right.
if something does happen, someone's there that can help you. Or always the never ever use alone. So
Right.
people are needing to learn to, it's not, have Narcan and never use alone. Narcan is a maybe, but no CPR.
Yeah.
And never ever use alone.
My goodness. Or, God, I didn't realize it was that expensive to go and get like a nasal spray, a Narcan nasal spray or an injection. But maybe even, look up harm reduction groups.
I've got friends sending me some. We have some at Pinnacle Peak.
Good, and as you should.
Yeah.
And maybe go online and just go harm reduction groups in your state, because people around the country listen to this. So just go harm reduction in your city and see if there's little groups like Shot in the Dark,
And
and
there
give
are.
them a call. Go to their website and say, hey, listen, I'm a user, and like I don't have $100 for a test, to go get some Narcan and those stuffs. You reach out to those groups; they'll hook you up.
They have been more than willing to mail doses, to send doses to people, to direct you to local resources.
It's a beautiful
It's a great place. Yeah, it's a very tight-knit community.
That's incredible stuff. Well, listen, I think the world of Pinnacle Peak. I just do. I mean, not all treatment centers are equal. We all know that.
No, and I'm going to shout out about this because I was working or volunteering with Shot in the Dark when I was working at Pinnacle before, like 5 years ago. I was working on my master's degree. And Pinnacle Peak was the first treatment center that was willing to hand out Narcan to its people that were discharging. Tyler Tisdale was 1,000% on board, and No other treatment centers, not even methadone clinics, were on board for handing out Narcan. Tyler Tisdale was. And he said, because you know what? If it just saves one person. So I've been doing overdose prevention stuff for him for 5 years.
Right.
Yeah. And so when I finished my master's program, I came back to look for Tyler.
That's amazing.
And here I am talking to you about harm reduction. And,
right.
And we love supervised injection. What about that guy that's not in treatment?
Well, that's exactly it too. And here's the other thing. If you think that going to treatment, you're going to have 100% success rate, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There's no treatment center anywhere in the world that has 100%. And if they do, they're it's the biggest lie that anybody will ever tell you. There is no treatment center that will give you 100% like graduation rate and you're never going to use again. No, especially when you're dealing with heroin and meth and injections, right? And IV users. Mm-hmm. Like there will be relapse after treatment.
Well, and that's the most dangerous time for a fentanyl user.
Well, because they haven't used for, let's just say 30 or, some odd days.
Even if a person stopped using for 12 hours, they're at higher risk for overdose.
Because when they go to use again, that's how
tolerance,
fast. Yeah. Wow. Crazy.
So people getting out of jail those people need Narcan.
And you know what? Because this is the truth. And I experienced this when I relapsed, because when I relapsed, I did OD. Thank God. This is why I always say my higher power was just like, this is not your time. Like, this is not your time, because I was ODing in my house. And I knew I was.
Were you by yourself?
I was by myself. Mm-hmm. I was using meth. And I tell people this is that when you and I had umpteen years of continuous recovery. So you go back to using the amount that we were using before. And I did. It was like I was partying like I was back when I was partying every night.
Wow.
But I don't know. Story was always told to me that people pick up right where they left off. I'm like, holy shit. Yeah. It was so true. So if they're in treatment for 30 days, they're going to think that they can use the same amount that they used right before they went into detox. And that's a deadly amount.
Yeah, because I feel like the brain doesn't forget, but the body can't handle it. It takes what it takes to escape.
Yes.
But the body can't do it.
But the body can't handle it. God. So anyway, I think it's a beautiful thing that y'all were handing out, Narcan to people who are graduating treatment.
Yeah.
They're saying, listen, we want the best for you and we're going to be here to support you, but fucking just in case.
Yeah.
Just in case. Stay alive.
Yep.
Stay alive. Kim, it's good to have you on.
Yeah,
it's good to have you on.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's really cool to have you on, and hopefully Tyler sends you back over again. Pinnacle Peak is somebody I partnered with at Art of Our Soul. They send some of their clients and members over to my art studio once a week, and it's been an awesome joy to kind of tap in and seeing them smile and have some joy. So it's been a really cool partnership with them, and hopefully long lasting, because I'm a huge believer that art is really a modality that needs to be. I don't think there's ever one modality that cures all. I think it takes a whole pie chart of modalities to help people heal as a whole. And I'm a huge proponent of the arts. I know you are too.
Yes, I am.
I know you are too. Art is just badass. It's just an escape where you don't have to talk to anybody. You can just do and be and let emotions pass through you and energy pass through you.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I love it. I love it. Kim, always good to have you on. If you want more information about Pinnacle Peak Recovery here in Scottsdale, Arizona, all that information is provided right there on the bottom part of the screen. Reach out, talk to somebody to intake. If you're a parent of a child who is wondering what to do, call the admissions line. Tell them what's happening. They'll listen to you and they'll figure out what program is best for your child or for you or your husband or your spouse or even a friend. Just pick up the phone, start the conversation, see what options are out there. They'll figure out what program best fits you. We'll see you on here for the next episode.